see it recorded.
There you go. That's the correct thing to hear.
Yes.
All right. So on that note, I wanted to introduce our new episode. So I'm going to kind of follow my notes on this. It's like a novel idea for me. But I'm trying to be a little more focused and a little more, now that I've got my sound improved, I need to improve my delivery. And I think part of it is a group makes me subconsciously nervous. So that's why I act silly more and talk faster. Whereas I finally got through all that on my solo ones. So I'm trying to kind of get zen about this. So
well, your sound, I can tell you your sound is improved and your lighting is a little improved. So I think that's good.
I look like a Rembrandt painting, and
you do look like a Rembrandt painting.
A Rembrandt self-portrait.
It's self-portrait.
I was going to say Vermeer, but then I was like, now we're going to
it's
Peter Greenaway discussion.
No, it's Rembrandt.
Thank you. Okay, so we're
Charles
back with deep
Lawton
images.
Is Rembrandt. I'm kidding.
All right, the beginning's going to be cut out. Okay, so we're back with deep images, and this evening we all have an appointment with the Wicker Man. The Wicker Man is a 1973 British folk horror film. It was directed by Robin Hardy, and it was written by Anthony Schaefer, who was a playwright who mainly was notable for Sleuth, which he later wrote the screenplay for the movie. And then he also wrote Hitchcock's Frenzy. He did a few entries into the Hercule Poirot, as Kevin Smith says, the Hercule Poirot franchise. I think he did Death on the Nile. He co-wrote Murder on the Orient Express. And the last one, I've forgotten the name. Appointment with Death. So, and then he kind of ended his career with the dreadful Summersby, terrible remake of a nice French film. But, we're not going to hold that against him. He's dead. So, The Wicker Man stars Edward Woodward.
He was also the brother of Peter Schaefer, who wrote Equus and Amadeus.
Yes, wow. And I got them mixed up for years. And I wasn't the only one. Even Anchor Bay occasionally would be like, Anthony Schaefer, Equus. I'm like, anyway, so Edward Woodward plays Sergeant Neil Howey. We'll get into that character shortly. He's famous for The Equalizer, an American TV series where he got kind of popular, and then it's been remade with Denzel Washington as the character in Americanized recent years. And I've actually seen some scenes, and for that kind of movie in this era, it's not terrible. It's fairly watchable. No. There's some really nice.
It's not the same show. That's the thing.
No, it's not. Yeah, it's not. But I like the fact that Denzel, and the fact that it's like rated R or whatever. His charisma and that fact is that he can kind of really. He's driving home the badassness that Woodward was held back by standards and practices. I'm not saying he's good.
I would say if your only experience, let's say you haven't seen Wicker Man, if your only experience with Ed Woodward was The Equalizer, you shall, I think, be pleasantly surprised by his range. as Howie is a very different character, very different.
Absolutely. And I was in that boat like in '93 when I first saw it, and I'd heard good things about it, but we'll get into more. It's such a convoluted Byzantine road because there's been like 4 cuts of this movie, and there's still controversy about it. And even I feel like my current opinions aren't in line with the people who've been marketing the final cut, which I'm assuming that's probably what Justin saw, but we'll get into that. However, the 50th anniversary set on Blu-ray came out 4 days ago. Of course, I have no money. But it supposedly has all 3 cuts. So as long as it's got the 99-minute, what I call the real cut, that's just me. And it was Robin Hardy until he discovered the print of the 92-minute cut and said, "Hey, I can sell this." And then he died a few months after the Blu-ray came out. I'm like, was it worth it?
I found an article said there was a 102-minute cut.
There was. No, that's the original movie. That's never been found. So let me use that as a segue. So it also stars Sir Christopher Lee, horror legend, no longer with us. Don't need to recount his career, but of course, for many people, he is the Count Dracula, and just a brilliant guy, and a brilliant guy in real life. I mean, I looked at those websites where it's like, did you know in real life Christopher Lee did these things? And I'm like, God damn, has any one person ever done that many things? I mean, not even talking about the range of roles, just in his personal life. But anyway, I
he
love
was also like a
Christopher.
professional operatic bass, wasn't he?
He was a lot of things. We could
He
we
was
could
a
do
lot of
show
things.
on
Yeah, he
Christopher
was.
Lee.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
but my point being is Lee had always claimed this was his favorite role of his own by far, and it was his favorite movie he'd ever done, and he passionately searched for that fucking 102-minute print. I think it might have killed him. I mean, he went to the death with it, and it still wasn't. His work in this movie is like Woodward's. I think it's against type in a lot of ways. A lot of people won't agree because it's horror. But if you really look at the nuances, he was onto something, and he knew it. He had a script and for that time, 1973, when the counterculture was blooming, and he actually he didn't slick his hair back. He grew it back and like let it look shaggy. And I was like, dude is a motherfucker. Oh no, this is our podcast. We can also featured in this movie, real quick, is Britt Ekland as Willow McGregor. And she's a Swedish model and actress, and most people talk about how she's gorgeous and she fucked a lot of rock stars. Well, I would like to submit that there's two movies I think she was great in, much greater than she is in The Wicker Man. Get Carter, a couple years before The Wicker Man, Michael Caine, and especially E. Cannibali, The Cannibals by Liliana Caviani with Pierre Clemente. I loved that movie, and that was directed by Liliana Caviani a few years before she did the really infamous Night Porter. So Britt could act. I mean, she could bring it when she had the right director, and she's good in this movie too. But she's still kind of an ingenue. Ingrid Pitt is in this, and that was a big selling point for a lot of people to see the movie. But her role's very small, and it's germane to one scene and maybe a pivot. But other than that, she has no real importance to the movie, which I was surprised to find out. I was so dumb that when I first rented it, even though I knew what Ingrid Pitt looked like, I thought she played Miss Rose because that was a much bigger role. And then I'm like, oh, that's not Ingrid Pitt.
Which part did she play?
She's the librarian. She's really a negligible character. I mean, she's an exposition.
Right.
Now the Miss Rose was played by this chick who I wasn't familiar with until I researched for the show. I mean, I knew her on The Wicker Man, but she
was in Tom Jones, I think.
I think so. Yeah, she was a very well-known British actress, and I think she was also a singer. And she's really good in that movie. She's not all glamorous like the other two, though she is kind of hot when you get to her pagan wear toward the end. But she delivers a lot of exposition and a lot of the kind of opinions that make Howie want to just beat her face in because they're just so like pagan. And I'm like, but she's my hero in this movie. Well, after Chris, but and Lindsay Kemp, the mime, is in it, and he plays one of the costume characters. And he was a famous mime in real life, and he was the mentor to both David Bowie and Kate Bush. Taught them mime, taught them a lot of performative stuff, and so in that case, let me segue over to that and make sure I haven't left anything exciting out. I want to stress for people watching, this is not the 2006 remake starring Nicolas Cage and Ellen Burstyn.
It's not that.
Yes, Nicolas Cage is Edward Woodward in his dreams, and Ellen Burstyn, great as she is no Christopher Lee for this kind of story. I mean, she's great in The Exorcist and Requiem for a Dream and a lot of other movies that are just more dramas. I mean, I loved her when I was a kid, just loved her, but The Wicker Man, I'm Lord Summerall, I wasn't feeling it. I get why they did it though, story wise, and maybe if the script and was better, and I more like the original movie, and maybe if someone like Nicolas Cage wasn't the star, and I like him sometimes. But he's kind of hamming it up. I mean, his emotional breakdown at the end, it's okay, but his work in Mandy was much better as an emotional breakdown. And it's nothing to Woodward's, because Woodward's, well, we'll get into that. Woodward's is revelatory to me. I think it's one of the great performances in all cinema. Hyperbolic statement number one. It's kind of like when Bill White said, Orson Welles. And my friend Tim McLean was like, "Oh boy!" And none of y'all even reacted. I'm like, "What are we supposed to say?"
Yeah, well, you got to choose your battles, right?
Right.
Exactly. It's like, at least he knows film. We'll just let him have this moment.
Yeah, I mean, it's not like it's the first time I've heard someone diss Orson Welles.
Well, yeah.
Yeah.
That's true. Yeah.
Let's spend some time on it. No, I'm kidding. Okay, so I had a few more notes. So I just want to mention that my first experience of The Wicker Man was in Danny Perry's series in cult movies. On cult movies, books called Cult Movies, before the magazine, which was great too. And I was like, I got to see this. You know, Edward Woodward, the Equalizer, and I'm like, Christopher Lee, Pagans. This is awesome. And he really made it sound like a really thought-provoking movie, and I'm like, that was a period where I was really challenging myself, not just with film, but like with books. I was reading like Robert Anton Wilson and Colin Wilson and Timothy Leary, and all kinds of abstract and consciousness raising stuff. And I was like, this is where I need to be, and this moment, and I'm kind of still there, sort of. But so. Anyway, after a search, I found it in Charlotte, the one place that had the cut version, the 87-minute. And the ending blew me away. I didn't know the movie was totally changed. I hadn't read that much. I mean, Peary didn't really get into it because I think a lot of people just didn't have much information beyond Robin Hardy is still looking for elements and Christopher Lee is vowed to find them, but no evidence. So like in late 80s though, the 99-minute, the real version came out, the director's cut, as Robin Hardy called it. And in 94, I hadn't seen it. No one in town had it for rent. So I bought it at Media Play. And I was like, this is a different movie and much better even than it was. I mean, it kind of staggered me seeing it. But what staggered me really was the ending of it, Act 3. But now I was able to kind of see the whole movie was stronger. It made more sense. And it's like the sequences are reordered. In the cut version, he spends one night on the island, but he actually spends 2 nights on the island.
Which is very important. That second night is very important.
It is. Everything about it is structured so that he's inexorably drawn toward his appointment with the Wicker Man. And, that's it. I don't know. Anyway, so director's cut, yes, it was great. And then Anchor Bay put out the wooden box. It was to like 10,000 pieces. I had a really low number, like 1,000, and I had it for years, and it had both cuts. And the thing is, between the Magnum Media Home Entertainment putting out that uncut tape in the late 80s, the elements for those missing scenes were lost. So when Anchor Bay remastered it, they had to take those scenes and reconstruct the movie again from a 1-inch tape and color correct it. Yeah. That was disappointing, and you could tell the difference, but a lot of it was DVD, so everything pops more. Didn't distract me, but I was glad I still then had my VHS, which had uniform quality, not as high quality as DVD, but it was like there was no like interruption. Anchor Bay would always put, "We apologize for the poor quality, but these are the elements that we have scoured the world to find the rarest interpositives in a vault in Rome," and all that kind of stuff. I mean, Anchor Bay really changed the whole vocabulary, I think, of film writing, film collecting. I mean, Jay Douglas, who I did know Jay Douglas because he used to send me the shit to review. I was his buddy, and I knew Bill Lustig lesser, but I did know his home number. That was cool. And he didn't berate me for having never seen Vigilante or Maniac. He's like, "I'll send you a copy in a minute here, Henry, but keep reviewing them, okay?" And I was like, "Fuck, man. I mean, they're great." And I did. I loved Maniac, and I really love Vigilante. And a friend of mine online just discovered Vigilante yesterday, and he's like so excited, and he's like tagging Rutanya Alda. And I'm like, dude, don't do that. She hates William Lustig. She had a terrible experience. She told me herself she hated that movie. And I'm like, and she's like one of the only ones alive. I mean, Fred Williamson, he probably didn't like it because he wasn't like a superhero in that movie. He was like violent and strong, but he was like a real grounded person. I mean, that's a fine Fred Williamson. Anyway, I don't know if y'all have seen Vigilante. If you're interested, but I highly recommend it.
That's probably for another show.
It is. Thank you. He's got my back here.
Oh, it's
So-
got Robert Foster in it.
Robert Forster. He was the
Yeah.
man. He was a cancer like me.
I'll
a
check it
moonchild. So 2014, they released the final cut. So that was 92 minutes. And so Robin Hardy had been looking for this other cut. This one company had it in a vault, and he's like, I'm going to put it out. This is great. And I'm thinking, so I haven't seen it. I have read things about it. I think I may have taken minimal notes here. If not, that's okay. I don't know if any of y'all have seen it. If you have, by all means, tell me
That's the 94, 92 minute.
92.
Yeah, that's the one I watch.
Okay, so when we get to you, you're gonna
Yeah.
help me out here. So I just didn't pay attention to it because I thought, what the hell? But now with this set, with all of it, it's like, okay, so we can kind of pick and choose what version we like best. Even though the only good one is the 99 minutes. I'm kidding. And I believe that's what Duane Cochran posted to our group, and I think that's Andrew watched the link that Duane posted.
Yeah,
By the way,
that was 99 minutes.
okay, that's the one that I like the best. Duane, talked to him right before we started shooting. Didn't beg him for technical help. I should have, but he wanted you guys
Yeah,
to know.
I liked it a lot better than the version I saw before, because the version I saw before didn't make a lot of sense.
It didn't. Yeah,
But that was in the 90s. That was a long time ago. I don't remember it very well. There were only
Yeah.
a few scenes I remembered. I definitely remembered that song about the tree after I heard it again, but
We'll talk about the music later a little bit too.
Yeah, the first I saw was the 88-minute version, and
Same here.
Yeah.
Mhm. Well, Tim Tolbert said he apologized for not being able to make it tonight. I know he has a huge fan base among our viewers thanks to his insights on the MCU and giant monsters. I'm really not kidding. He really does. It's gaining a following. And he told me the other day in a sensitive moment that it makes him feel good that you guys like him. For what it's
Aw.
worth.
He's Bigfoot. How can we not?
He's Sasquatch.
yeah.
I just
But-
like giant monsters, so anyone who likes giant monsters knows about them.
Exactly.
Right.
You remember when Duane, I won't get you off the track, Keith, but you remember when we did the kaiju and Bill and when he said, and Scott, when he said, pretty much if a movie has a werewolf, a Frankenstein, a dinosaur, and or a giant ape, I'm there.
And or
That's
Right.
fair. That is
I'm
fair.
like,
Sure.
Well, except for the dinosaur, you got it all in Mad Monster Party, baby. You
Well,
know,
that's an awesome
I
thing.
mean, it
Great film.
is. And we'll do that sometime. So, okay.
Oh yeah.
So my pertinent notes, I've talked about the version. So I'm going to go ahead and let Justin what? He left the room.
Well.
I shined the spotlight and he walked away from the
Yeah,
spot
he
stage.
just hopped on the airplane. He's heading out to the Scottish Isles.
I guess he had an appointment with the
Yeah,
Wicker Man.
the
Oh,
appointment
dear.
Oh,
with
I
the
hope
Wicker
not.
Man.
Mr. Howie, where are you? Okay. So we're going to let Bill talk first then.
Oh, great. Yikes.
And
Oh,
wait,
there he is.
Back.
No.
Justin's
Wow.
back. Man, the stuff we said about
apologize.
you. No.
Oh,
Justin,
I went to the bathroom. I had to go to the bathroom. Sorry.
That's not
thank you for
allowed.
sharing
Yeah.
that. And so tell us about your other trip or the Astor to see this film.
Yeah, I go to this Art Deco Cinema, the Astor, which always shows classic films, and it shows the occasional new one. Like we went and saw Oppenheimer about 5 weeks ago, but saw 2001: A Space Odyssey last night, and maybe 2 or 3 weeks ago, I think, saw The Wicker Man. And I didn't know much about it because I'd only heard about the film relatively recently through a friend of mine. And then all of a sudden, coincidentally, it was showing up at the Astor because it was the 50th year anniversary, 1973 film. And I'm a big fan of the horror genre, but this is not really a horror. It's more, I suppose you call it a cult film. It's about a cult, obviously. Everyone's probably seen the film. And it's the cinematography
Literally
is
a cult
amazing.
film.
Yeah.
If you visited Scotland a couple of times, like I have, I'm a big fan of that country. So it's good that it's set in Scotland in a fairly remote western region, one of the islands in the west of Scotland. It's very much a film of its time as well. It's sort of during the free love counterculture type period, but you wouldn't really expect to see that on a remote island off the western coast of Scotland. But certainly it's sort of free love and a very strange sort of atmosphere or culture on the island. And then you put The Fish Out of Water, which is Edward Woodward's character as a conservative Christian cop. And ironically, my movie buddy, who I often go to these classic cinema films with, is a conservative Christian. Which is kind of incongruous if you know anything about me as well. But which is so it's a sort of a strange pairing to be going to the cinema. But Dave's very much into cinema and making films as well, sort of on an amateur level. But he said to me after the film, can you imagine getting a character like Edward Woodward's character in a modern contemporary film? And I said, you probably wouldn't get such a character. And he said, yeah, that's true. That's true. So, but he was a fish out of water in the movie. And there's lots of themes of him with sort of temptation as a virgin as well, temptation and self-denial. Particularly the scene where I think it's Brett Eklund in the next room at the hotel, and he's
singing,
singing, and he's clearly in pain and trying to withstand temptation by not going into the next room. So that was a standout part of the film. There's obviously lots of full frontal nudity as well. It's very much a film of its time in that respect. I'm a big fan of Christopher Lee. I didn't actually know that he was as tall as he is, but you see how tall he actually is when he's alongside Edward Woodward's character, who's not actually short when you see him alongside other characters, but when he's next to Christopher Lee, you can see the difference.
He looks very short.
Yeah.
So Christopher Lee, I like in the old Hammer Horror Dracula films, which he did many of. He was also Saruman in. He should have been in it more in the final cut, but he was also Saruman in the Lord of the Rings, Peter Jackson films.
I just looked it up, and he was 6'5", just so you know.
Yeah.
I was gonna say Christopher Lee was not a short guy either, so
yeah, Christopher Lee is 6'5".
Right. Yeah. And he's got that sort of resonant baritone voice, which comes
out
of the film.
That very deep, commanding voice.
Yes.
Yeah. So he was such a fan of Tolkien as well that he apparently made a point of reading the Lord of the Rings every year of his life. That's another thing I found out about him when he was doing Lord of the Rings. But in this film, he's great in it. I really liked the twist in the film as well, in terms of I'm not giving away any spoilers because most people have seen the film, but it's all a setup.
It's in the title.
Yeah,
the policeman is lured to the island as effectively a sacrifice to the pagan god, so that the crop will be healthy in the following year. So, as someone said, you'd be fairly disappointed if you don't get to see a Wicker Man at some point in the film, given the title, and that does come in. That comes in at the end. So, but I didn't expect it, having never seen the film before. I didn't expect the twist in that he was being manipulated right from when or even before he first landed on the island. Some interesting cameos with Lindsay Kemp as Lindsay Kemp was sort of the Queenie owner of the pub or hotel, the landlord of the hotel, and working behind the bar. And I thought there was something familiar about him. And then I remembered I'd seen a documentary on Kate Bush about a year ago, where as a mime artist, Lindsay Kemp is quite prominent in that documentary, because he was teaching back in the 70s. He taught Kate Bush modern dance, and also was also working with David Bowie at the time as well. So that was an interesting cameo. But yeah, I really enjoyed the film. For something I didn't know much about up until this year, it was good to get along and see the film. I think it was a 99-minute version, but it seemed about that long anyway. So not too long. Great cinematography, and I just like the whole ambiance, I guess, of the film. Yes, I would see it again. I quite enjoyed it.
I'm glad you liked it.
Yeah.
I think that the thing with Howie is, it's that trope of, you turn out to be the one you're looking for. You know what I mean?
Right.
Yeah.
You're searching for something, and it turns out to be you. And then, so the whole Rowan Morrison is a hare, like a rabbit. And I'm like, man, they are really fucking with this guy. And
he was so offended too, wasn't he? When he's standing outside the classroom, for example.
Is this a joke?
Constantly
But he can't believe what's being taught to the kids in school and so forth.
Yeah.
It's one of those movies
He's so self-righteous about it.
that's so good on rewatch.
Yeah.
That's the thing. It's like every time I watch this movie, which is at least once a year now, I always catch something new that I hadn't caught before, and it just benefits from rewatch. It's one of those movies.
Absolutely.
It only gets better. You know?
Mhm. So, those are your thoughts, Mr. Justin?
Yeah, great film.
Fantastic. So, Bill,
What do you think?
I don't know what the word is. Illuminate things for us.
Oh, I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know if I can do that.
Bill is looking suspicious.
Yeah,
Uh-oh.
I hope it's not a controversial position, but when I look at reviews and things, I'm a little shocked at how many people are, Howie is an unlikable protagonist. And I give him full credit for that. That's a bold thing to do because usually we have the hero and everything. But apparently some people have taken that and they're like, well, the people on the island, I'm rooting for them. They're the heroes. Like, no.
I think it's poking holes in both. I think, he's poking
I mean,
holes in
they're
both.
definitely murderers. Like,
one of
they're
them
basically spending the entire film sexually harassing him.
Which
is what he deals with at work. Which, like, it was interesting because one is you can tell every scene that wasn't in the original version because the quality is slightly different. It reminds me of when I was watching the Roadshow version of South Pacific, and like. It was interesting because that film was like loaded with all these different colored filters, and so like anytime there was a scene that wasn't in the regular cut of the film, it was like it was through a white filter. And this is what very much like that because there was a lot of grain, and like they set up very early on that he's a virgin, which you didn't really know that until the end of the other cuts, so it didn't really make a whole lot of sense. But here they're like really disrespecting him. You know he's a serious guy. Like he sees the Jesus saves at the beginning, and he says, there's a time and a place for everything. I like the sentiment, but it needs to be taken down and things like that. But the whole, like, I mean, you hear him talking and making fun of him because, and it's like he's living in a hostile work environment, and I hate to be too sympathetic to a cop. And it was also really confusing in the film because
I'm not able to do that. Sorry, that's just me.
Like at all, just no.
I think people who are rooting for the cultists are I don't know, they're misguided at best,
I'm mind boggling. Even if they say, well, it goes after both sides. It's like, one side is a guy with a stick up his butt that's no fun at parties. And the other side is a bunch of mass murderers.
But you don't know that until the very end.
It is possible.
It's
possible to have,
and that's the switch. That's the switch is when you know that, and then you start liking Howie against all better judgment.
Well, you
oh my god,
you feel bad for Howie, but I don't think you ever like him really. I mean, but I think you feel bad for him because he is But yes, his performance makes you like him, but I don't think you really like Howie as a character because he's always. Like you said, stick up his ass. He's always like that. He's always self-righteous, and he's and he's always a bit of a dick to everybody with his authority, his queen's authority and all of that, and it just rubs everybody wrong. But he is still the protagonist. He is still the hero of this story, even though he's also the fool.
Well, that's good writing.
He has admirable qualities. He went to this island to look for what may have happened to a small girl.
Yes.
Okay, he puts his life on the line. He shows heroic bravery.
But he doesn't know.
He's a dick, but he does in fact do his job.
Exactly. He's not. It's not like he is not a. Just because you don't like him doesn't make him not the hero of this story.
Yeah, he's not. He's not corrupt. I'll give him that.
But it is fun how that, because I mean, who wouldn't like these people? They seem to get along. They have sex all the time. They run around.
Go ahead,
sounds like a great island to go visit. But then find out really.
It's not on.
If you rewrote this as a liberal female social worker, hears that some kid is being abused, goes to this town where a bunch of fundamentalist Christian yahoos have pretty much just running it their own way, stuff that totally would be illegal, but they're doing it anyway. And then in the end, she's stoned to death. Nobody would be saying, boy, those folks look like they're having, their community really, they get along. Oh yeah, they sacrifice. I mean, when Christopher Lee is saying, listen, animals are, Animals are good. Kids are even better.
I'll tell you what, I think what it is.
Grown up is like, wait a minute. Let's hold on. You said kids are even better. So kids were on the menu. If he had broken down and opened up the door and let that naked woman come into his bedroom, they would be like, damn, well, let him go. I guess we'll have to go with plan
Yeah,
B,
exactly. They would have had exactly, they would have to rework the plan if he had broken down. But they had also vetted him.
In Summerall's mind, and I think he gives an impassioned justification what he's doing toward the end too, all the while they're killing Howie, is that he believes strongly in this stuff. He's as much of a religious he's as much
he's a religious fanatic, unquestionably.
I believe he's a religious fanatic.
I disagree. See,
I agree with Bill on this. I think he believes in it the same way Trump believes in himself. It's it's bullshit. He has wrapped up in his own delusion here that he uses to manipulate other people.
I think so.
Yeah, but he's manipulating other people to save their entire way of life.
Well,
in
I think he's doing it to save
his way of
I think he's doing it to save
great
himself.
Grandfather or whatever did. I mean, so this guy comes on the island. He's got a bunch of trees that he scientifically made to grow on this island, and he, to get some cheap labor, he
I'm not
people there to go
empirically he's right as far as the outcome. What I'm saying is listen to what he's saying. It's easy to get blinded by he's the bad guy and he kills the guy. But this is the whole point of nuanced, multidimensional writing, is that almost everything Lee says until maybe the very end when he's just like, kill the guy. It depends on your ideological compass. By mine, the stuff he says, and I'm not a Christian, I'm anti-authoritarian, I'm anti-police. It's true. I mean, and it's true whether you agree with it or not, his conviction is unwavering, and Christopher Lee himself has said many times that he believes that. So if Christopher Lee believes it, who am I to argue?
What are you saying, Kaelyn?
Yeah, I was saying it's logically consistent. Like whether you agree with what Summerall says during all of this or not, it's consistent. You can see where he's getting it. It makes sense. He is remarkably consistent. He doesn't just come out of left field all of a sudden at any point.
No, I agree with that. It's just that I think in his performance, to me, he gives off the air of somebody who is saying what he needs to say to get the outcome that he wants. Not because he's a true believer. I don't think Summerall is a true believer. I think he is in a position where he needs everybody else to be true believers.
I think he's a true believer. Well, I think he's the mirror of Howie. I think they're both religious fanatics. They're both wrong and right about different things. But ne'er shall the twain meet. And I think that's part of the point.
Oh yeah. There's no point in which they're going to come together on this.
No, and I think as we're showing, everyone who watches it is going to bring their thing into it, which we all do, really, whether we mean to or not. I mean, I've had Chris
watching it, like, I see where both of you are coming through on that, and it's like, I guess I see it as maybe he's not a true believer in that he just takes it like, at face value. I think that he understands that there's a reason that people believe it. He understands the psychology of it.
There you go. That's what I'm saying. That's what I'm
talking
about.
But the brilliance of it to me is that I think...
But also, I think he does believe it. Because
I think he believes
like somebody who's in a cult like that.
I think he believes it.
He manipulates, but I think
his theory is plausible that he's manipulating them, but I don't necessarily think it's accurate. But
I think that's the tragedy.
I think it's a valid interpretation.
The tragedy of it is that Howie is also a true believer, and he's full of shit. But he's right at the end. He's right at the end on a fundamental two levels. One, a fundamental human level, like, why are you killing me? Why are you doing this? God help me. And then you're like, okay, I get it.
Yeah.
Well, let me say on that.
He talks about how your crops failed because of this. He's right. He sees through it to an extent on a rational level, albeit he's very emotionally biased. But then again, he is about to be killed, so he's a little panicky. But he's making great points.
The brilliance of, I think, the Howie character as written and performed, everything about it, is that he perfectly, demonstrates that very common Christian perspective that is so clouded by their window or their closed-minded world in which they have operated and educated themselves, that they cannot comprehend even at all where Summerisle and his folks are coming from. To him, this is
he doesn't want to know.
It is full on alien, because it's too much of it's just so outside of his worldview.
Willful ignorance is not an excuse.
I'm just saying that's
I know you're not saying it is.
But that's what's so real about it. And I think that's why it connects a lot.
He's very naive emotionally,
because
and I sympathize with him.
Even when he's looking at it straight in the face, he cannot even comprehend what's happening.
A lot to take.
But he's right though. He's like, this is evil. This is evil. And in the end, it is evil. This is an anti-pagan film.
Yeah, but
it's not evil to them.
If I were pagan, I would not hold. Oh, it's not evil to them, but it wasn't evil to David Koresh or
I know
Jim Jones
exactly.
Either.
That's what's so brilliant about.
Yeah.
You know,
well, but that's
people like that are charming.
Mainline
actually used to know one of David Koresh's victims.
I mean, mainline Christians have been doing this to non-believers for millennia. So it's not like this is an aberration among pagans. I mean,
no, it's not. But this is not a.
Howie is supporting a religion that is hypocritical to its absolute core, and so for him to cast aspersions, or fans to cast aspersions of superiority to Summerisle, it's like, check yourself, man.
No, I think he was perfectly. Listen, he didn't come to that island to proselytize them or as a missionary or anything.
And Howie
that'd be a different.
He did proselytize.
And Howie is not a hypocrite.
But they brought him here. They brought him.
I know they brought him
in there. I mean,
he definitely started proselytizing when he saw that schoolroom.
Yeah. But they make a really good point. He's there for 2 nights and 3 days. Yeah. He is not a hypocrite. This guy believes it with all of his heart. He really is.
I admire that
a true believer who fights against temptation. They show
now,
him. I mean, I don't know if I would have been able to hold out on that.
The reason I agree with Keith, I don't think, when you see Christopher Lee in that wonderful performance, the meeting, the first half, he's like one of those villains from a serial who has to explain everything. It's like he respects this guy. This is the only guy on the island he could be honest with. His ancestor came to this island with a bunch of trees that he scientifically bred to grow in this climate. He didn't pray to the elder gods. He didn't do any pagan mumbo jumbo. It was science. He brought it here. But that's not.
And he exploited the people.
He exploited the people with this religion, and he's telling him this. It's like he at no point.
But I don't think he's one thing. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah.
I'm saying he's as misguided as Howie because they both are programmed by their
I think he knows just what.
I'm not making moral judgments. I don't go into movies making moral judgments.
Next year, when the crops fail again, people are like, next year when the crops fail, he's going to be sacrificed. No, he's going to be on the first plane out of there. As soon as he sees, I don't think the animals are showing up. He's out.
And that's what Howie was right about.
He's using Howie to gamble that he's going to give himself
one more year. Yeah.
Give me 1 year. Yeah. Exactly. It's like, just reelect me 1 more year. Just 1 more year.
Let's try again.
And
I think that's why.
I feel like there was a legend at the beginning, kind of like Fargo, where he thanks the Lord Summerisle, and like makes you think that this is a real place.
Yeah, and that was on purpose.
But I'll tell you what, I think that's a lot of why you're mentioning. Some people feel like the cultists are heroes. I think that is really just a credit.
I don't think they're heroes.
Well, I think that's just a credit to Christopher Lee. I think that people, the people who don't analyze why they like things and don't like things, I think they're drawn to Christopher Lee's performance in that he's so attractive. He sounds so authoritative. He commands every moment that he's on the screen. And I can see where some people are just drawn to that. And they're like, he's so charismatic. In fact, they're getting caught up in the cult of Lord Summerisle while they're watching the movie.
Right.
But that's
it kind of reminds me of I remember I was on a group where we were talking about that Irish show Ballykiss Angel, and somebody referred to Kathleen and Father McAnally as villains, and how are they villains? They're kind of like religious. They're kind of like Edward Warwick because they're like super religious, but villains. I couldn't see that. I could not see those characters as villains.
Well, that's that bifurcated way that we train ourselves to think. Good is this
we're too
guy or bad
binary.
guy? Yeah, good guy, bad guy, good guy, bad guy. You know, when you're talking to your 40-year-old, he goes, Dad, is that a good guy or bad guy? It's like you should grow out of that and be able
Yes.
to and watch things with
There's
a more
complexity.
nuance. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Sure. Well, it's
And,
like,
like,
the
It's
people who
great
thought,
writing.
Like,
It's
you
great
gotta,
writing.
you gotta look at it
Yeah.
critically. You have to be like, okay, well, why do I want to root against Sergeant Howie this whole time? You know, and for me, like, I recently rewatched it getting ready for this conversation, and I was like, okay, thinking about like previous watches versus this one, it's like, all right, so why do I feel this way about these characters? And it's like, for him, it's just like, I think he's a self-righteous asshole, and I just really hate that, you know. I don't do well with people like that, but also
They don't like me. I mean, so
and I don't like cult leaders.
they've never liked
Yeah.
me.
They're both
Christians
kind of
aren't
awful
into me.
people.
But only
Yeah.
one of them is Christopher Lee, and
That's
you're
right.
automatically drawn to the
Christopher Lee,
charisma.
and I'm gonna root for Christopher Lee.
and
the
that's
actor.
that's a good thing.
Not
So
Lord
many,
Summer Isle,
Same
the
with
character.
Edward
So,
Woodward.
yeah.
so many
Edward
times in
Woodward
these
comes
cult
out
movies,
of nowhere.
yeah,
Sorry,
they-
Bill. Go ahead.
I mean, I would say so many times in these movies where they have an evil cult, the cult leader is this horrifying creature that nobody would follow. And it's
Right.
like, that's probably not how it is. I mean, it just
No,
doesn't
they are
cross.
remarkably charming
Yeah.
people in reality.
Yeah,
That's-
and you
that's
don't
the
get much
thing.
more charming than Christopher Lee.
I mean,
You
this came
don't.
out.
He was like he was
Sam
at the
Raimi and Thou
perfect.
Shalt Not Kill, except he's pretty scuzzy in that.
Yeah, he
God,
could wear
Chris-
that Cher wig and he doesn't look silly. I mean, how does he pull that off? It's
Yeah,
incredible.
Christopher Lee in
Yeah.
this
Yeah,
movie
that
never
was
looked-
hilarious.
never looked
Just
better.
like people watching it now with all this anti-trans stuff, and people seeing Christopher Lee in that. Oh my God, he's wearing a dress.
He never looked
But
better.
that was the thing. I mean, they were a progressive community within their community.
Yeah.
The
Mhm.
mistake was trying to lure in people that were ideologically their foes, ostensibly. And Howie doesn't do anything to make you think he doesn't fucking hate these people. He doesn't hurt them.
Sure.
He doesn't strike them. But, you know, his constant wisecrack.
Constantly
Definitely.
talking
We
smack.
get it, dude. We
Yeah,
get
he
it. You
definitely
hate them.
Like,
has
the-
the
the-
superiority
That's not very
complex.
Very
Christian.
upset about how they raise their children.
The moment in the
When
film
he
that just
sees that
Yeah, it's like it's
schoolroom,
none of his business.
was when he
but-
like he just like makes that cross like on the grave. I'm just like, dude, this is not
yeah,
a Christian cemetery.
he's
Don't
like,
just
Yeah.
mess with somebody's grave. You
he's
don't.
like,
There's a lot.
this is England. This is a Christian country.
Ah,
And like,
Yeah.
yeah.
well, at
I
least
think
there
it
they
has to be
actually have an
planned.
official church. So I mean,
Okay.
he's
Like
it's
I
not
said,
as
he's a-
wrong as
he's
it
a
would be if
jerk
you were an
and-
American.
He is
How
a,
many-
he is an asshole, but
How many
Again, that's
horror
part
movies
of-
have a jerk as a protagonist? That's a
what?
and
A
maybe
few.
that's
Unheard
one
of.
reason. Maybe
That's
that's one
a
reason
few.
it didn't do well.
And
But
one of the
the-
But
things
you're
that-
right.
But I
The
don't
88-minute
I
cut
don't
is so
think we
screwed
have
up
They don't
because
usually.
you
I
don't
don't-
get the scene where you find out that he's a virgin at the beginning, and
Yeah.
he's with
Mm.
his girlfriend, and it's like I was totally confused by the end because I thought that was his wife because he has this
We-
very prominent ring.
Let's just
And then-
disown that 87-minute cut.
Yeah,
I mean, I think it should be consigned to the dustbin of history as film
Away.
scholarship.
yeah,
I don't think that's the story.
it makes zero sense.
Strongly
was a
misrepresents the
mistake.
story. But what I wanted to say is the crux of this to me. One of you guys, maybe a couple of you, mentioned the word twist. That's the whole point. 3/4 of the way through the movie, I was like, fuck Howie. Christopher Lee, he's a little shady, but I'm with him. I love animals more than humans. And God had his chance, and in your modern parlance, blew it. That's in accord with my own spiritual beliefs.
Mhm.
That's just me. Maybe I'm a weirdo, but well, maybe obviously I am. But
We're
my
all
point
weirdos
is-
here, yeah.
and then he
Cool.
flips it, and you're
Yeah.
like, Christopher Lee's getting menacing, and Howie's starting to make me want him to live. And that's just, to me, like I said, it's brilliant writing, acting,
Yeah.
performing, directing, flawless.
But thank God they didn't go with the suggested ending that the suits wanted, which I don't know if you
What was
hear.
that?
They
What
they
was that?
wanted, as he's screaming and praying to God to save him, it starts raining and it puts the fire out.
No.
Oh God!
I know.
No.
That would have
no.
been cheesy.
That would have been
No.
terrible.
No.
And then
Yeah.
they would have stoned him to death. So it doesn't. It's not like it's
His-
gonna
Yeah,
save
it
him.
wouldn't have made that big a difference.
Yeah, no.
He is so powerful that when I saw the movie, and I was way more anti-Christian than I am now. I'm much more accepting of Christianity now. I'm not into it, but however, I was a staunch Christian my early life. So I do know what I'm talking about Christianity and its many foibles. But at that time I was like, yeah, fuck all this pagans. But then it's like he starts screaming, oh God, oh God. And it made me feel like I did when I was like 12, 13, calling out to God, like, why am I ugly? Why does everyone hate me and beat me up?
Oh,
You know,
this is
and it was
for
like,
sad children.
wow, you know, but I was saying it was so passionate. Like, okay, a guy like him in that moment, he means it. He's like, God,
Yeah.
man, if you get me out of this,
He's
I'm your man
desperate.
forever.
Yeah.
And
Well,
he's at the end of his life, like,
right.
you know,
He knows there's no way
Yeah.
out.
Emotional desperation at the end of their life.
Like
People
one
who are
thing he's
very
really
profoundly
upset about.
religious will scream for God. People will scream
And
for
you're about to
Mhm.
die
not even if
horribly.
not that
We're all going to
religion.
die, but
And
like-
isn't it? And when the fire
Yeah.
is taking him, isn't he screaming, Daniel?
Yes.
If I remember right, like
Couple
Daniel
times,
in the
yeah.
lion's den and all
Yeah.
that kind of stuff. You know,
At one point,
is-
he screams that he's unshrived, which means he didn't get to speak for. He didn't actually get forgiven by a priest before he died, so he's really upset about
Catholic
that.
because he's Catholic, right? Yeah,
And it
He's
doesn't
Anglican
sound
and
like a
close.
bunch
Forever,
of dogma.
basically.
It sounds like a guy who, in his soul, believes that not to hurt other people, as he sometimes came across, but because that's what he believes is his moral compass. And I'm
Now,
like,
let's get into like maybe a little bit of tricky analysis here and just say, was he a true believer in God and and Jesus Christ, or was he a true believer in Catholic dogma, which is
He says
not
Christ a
exactly
lot.
the same thing, you
I
know,
know.
because the things like that at the end indicate that this is somebody who is committed to a religious institution and a religious belief that has been inculcated to him, and not something that he has necessarily come to on his own. And there could be an argument to be made that he was just a very religious person versus someone who really, you know, knew God, kind of like that. You know, he only knew the institution. And so
well, my
that's,
take
you know,
is, when I was a Christian, I wasn't like this. I listened to Black Sabbath. I didn't care about premarital sex as long as they were in love. Back then, I believed that.
so you weren't a Catholic.
well, is he a
Well,
Catholic in this movie, or is he
I
Anglican?
thought he
just
was
always-
Anglican, but
Me
I
too.
could be
Yeah.
wrong.
I thought Anglican as
Anglican-
well.
I think
Anglican
he
and
refers
Catholic,
to the Holy
same
Church
thing,
of
yeah.
England,
Oh,
which would make it
I
yeah.
was an
Anglican, yeah.
Episcopalian, but that didn't matter to me. I didn't care about the
Hey, I
church.
was
My
also
mom drugged me.
Episcopalian.
Yeah,
fun.
and the poor man's Catholic Church, my mom always said, and then joined
Yeah.
it. And you know, but I'm a Southerner, and I wasn't a Baptist, but you know, I didn't like any of that hatefulness. You know, I was like,
Right.
Black Sabbath sings a lot of songs about God and morality, and they did. And it's like, Christians are propaganda. I mean, the church are propagandists, and they still are, always will be. But in my opinion, I was like, I didn't have to go to church to feel God within me. And in other words, I talk to God all the time, but it wasn't a God that someone told me this is. It was like a feeling that I felt. In hindsight, I don't think he was there. Maybe I don't believe he was there rationally.
Right.
However, it was a consolation, and that's what faith is to a lot of people, especially when they're downtrodden and alone and hurting. And I feel like if I were Howie with my version of Christianity, I would have been like, let's find out what these pagans have to say.
Right. And
Yeah.
see,
And if I can't convert them, who cares? I forgive them.
Well,
They're going to go to
okay,
heaven too.
There's another
Yeah,
theme then that is
that's
being
how I would
religious
be.
theme that is being tackled here, and that is authority. Because as you said, he's with the Church of England, not Catholic Church. I think I misspoke. But you know, that's still a church that's an institution based on a hierarchy of authority that starts at God and comes down, right?
Patriarchal authority.
Right?
Yeah.
And then I'm at the bottom. Yeah.
And at the same time, you know,
it's probably not that different from Catholicism based on what I know.
Right. And you've got the pagan parallel happening here, because there's also the authority paradigm here, or hierarchy, that's happening with Lord Summerisle. So you actually have the two of these paralleling each other a little bit, and so there is commentary on both of these. But what's interesting, I think part of what resonates with this movie in 1973 is that the pagan religion wins out. I think that's partly why it resonates the way it does.
Well, I think also
as a horror
it's
film.
Right. It was a shift of values, apparently.
Yeah.
I mean, it was of its time. And to be honest, I kind of wish we were still in that time and it hadn't become so politicized, these kind of ideals.
I love the fact that there's no politics in this. It's all.
Well, when I say, right, what I mean is everything to do with these ideals are now politicized.
Exactly.
You know, weapons
Yeah.
against each
Right.
other. Whereas back then it was like,
hard to make
no,
this now.
you know, people should be healthy. People shouldn't be enslaved by dogma. People should be in touch with their sexuality. People should feel free to worship who they want to worship. That's what I grew up with in the 1970s.
Yeah.
And, you know, back then Nixon was a crook, period, you know, because he was anti-life, you know,
Yeah.
and I was about life, you know, I was a fucking John Lennon hippie, you know, and my thing was, look at Christopher Lee. He's got these beautiful women and not so beautiful women, but obviously they're all getting laid. They're having fun. They're open-minded. They're not cruel to each other. They're in touch with nature. These are great eternal values that the earth could stand to get back to instead of just like blowing up pipelines and threatening war. You know, but we're not there. You know?
That free love thing coming in 1973 is also kind of interesting too, because it's so well directed. And I think it's missing from that 88-minute version, right? The orgy sequence.
I don't think it was there, but
I think that was
25
cut.
years.
I think that was cut from the 88 version. And it's so integral to Howie's temptation to have that, because that's so far outside of his paradigm of acceptability to see that. And you know, and it is directed in such a way that it's both erotic and also unsettling at the same time. So we have both an attraction and revulsion to happen as a viewer while we're watching that. Like we should, this is, you know, there's an aspect that's good, and yet,
that's with him too,
and yet there's also, it appears dirty, and you know, and so we're and it's just really good directing. The movie is just so well directed.
Regarding like that attraction and revulsion thing, also just the like sexuality stuff and the gender roles in that, and like the egalitarianism that you see, because like when I was doing this rewatch, I was watching it with somebody who had never seen it, and who'd only seen the version of the film that we shall not speak of with a different cast. And I was just like, oh, we need to fix that. Please watch the original with me. And so I showed that to her. This is one of my partners, by the way. I'm polyamorous. So speaking of free love and all that stuff, it's still alive.
Oh yeah. I live outside of Austin. I know whereof you speak.
Awesome. So we were talking about.
Is that where Burning Man is?
Oh my god!
In the desert.
I know, somewhere down there.
Effigies. All right. No, but like one of the things that's interesting in that scene that my partner pointed out is that with that orgy sequence, it's women on top. It's women driving the sexuality. And then with the whole scene with Willow trying to seduce Howie, that's her driving it, you know? And something that is absolutely not allowed in this like hardcore conservative Christian environment, you know, and in this pagan environment, it's like the women get to have sexuality. People get to talk about these things. Nudity is acceptable. Women's pleasure is something that is important to them. And so I think that's kind of one of those jarring things for him too. And I think that also for an audience watching this, where we're used to, even if we don't agree with that, we're used to the idea that, you know, that's not a typical sex position that's like acceptable. So that kind of, I think, adds to kind of that like off-kilter feeling, which I found just really, really interesting.
By the time I watched The Wicker Man, that stuff was new to me, and it was liberating. I didn't and don't find anything taboo about any of that. Paganism,
I mean, I don't
sexuality.
either, but
I don't either. But in the context of the film, I'm just saying.
And I'm taking as a participant, and sometimes when I have luck.
But you know, I thought the scene.
I need to stop drinking water. It's dangerous.
The scene where Willow is trying to seduce him. I mean, I don't object to the scene; it's kind of cool. But there was something about it that bothered me. It's the one
Yeah,
scene
it was a
in the
little
film.
uncomfortable because you're feeling his feelings, maybe.
Well,
Yeah.
but he shouldn't be feeling anything. There's a wall between them. He doesn't know what's going on the other side, and yet
Yeah.
somehow he does. It's the one
Imagination.
scene that
Magic.
it made
I
me
consider
think that
that as
maybe there was a
supernatural.
well, that's
Yeah.
the thing.
Yeah, there you go.
I didn't like the one supernatural thing. One of the things I like about this. I mean, look, the three big folk horror. We got this one, Blood on Satan's Claw, and Witchfinder General. I love Witchfinder General, and I like this one too because take the supernatural out of it, and to me, it's a lot scarier. Cults are real. Cult leaders are real. I could be shoved into a Wicker Man. I don't think I'm going to have Satan's Claw bloodying me at any time. So that scene just seemed out of place because this movie was so careful to avoid any hint of the supernatural.
Well, if you want to remove supernatural from it, just think of it as it's lapsing into the rules of a musical.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay. I mean,
this
at
is
that
kind
point,
of a musical. There's an awful lot of music in it.
Yeah, if you think about it, it's the rules of
Yeah.
the musical that sometimes you sing the songs and they hear you, and sometimes they don't.
Right.
Yeah.
And in this case,
And he's hearing her singing through the wall, and like, literally
Isn't there a
saying,
word for that? Like when something's like real
That's
within
a good
the
point.
narrative, and when it's not real but representative. Is it eidetic? Is that not the word? Is it?
Diegetic and
Diegetic,
non-diegetic.
So
Thank
yeah,
you.
I mean, if it helps, that might be. But I've always just been okay with accepting that it's like a supernatural element. But if it helps, it might just be. Just think of it in terms of a musical, because yes, the movie has enough music in it that it could it could pretty qualify.
But that's what's so cool is
also
that
because the villagers are screwing with him the whole time. It's like if you want to think of it as not a supernatural thing, they're
wasn't there a moment where he saw her room through the window?
Spell seduction thing, but maybe she's not.
No,
maybe
he's looking out the window and he's seeing stuff down in the bushes.
He's seeing in the garden.
Yeah,
he has a
right.
different
He
perspective.
she's
than,
right next.
Summerisle.
Yeah, and she's right next door to him. Actually,
yeah.
I mean, actually, I see something like that, and I just think there's a producer saying, "Time for a nude scene."
Yeah.
I mean, probably.
Perfect.
And
movie,
to be
though.
fair, it's a really good scene, and there's a bit of a body double there, which I never quite understood why they use the body double. So
she was pregnant.
Is that why?
Oh, and you know what I found out? She did not. That's not her voice. Not only singing, that's not her speaking voice. It's all both Annie Ross of this Lambert Hendrickson Ross music group. I didn't know that until tonight, or I'd forgotten it and relearned it. So you don't really hear Britt Eklund talking or singing. I knew you didn't hear her singing.
No, you don't need.
Yeah, I knew the singing wasn't her. But
you don't need to.
I also thought it was quite interesting at the end near the end when Howie tries to get the villagers to think twice about the direction they're going on and tries to basically oppose Lord Summerhill and says, "What are you going to do if you kill me and the crop fails again next year, and you kill someone else next year and the crop fails again?" And Lord Summerhill looks a bit worried for maybe a split second.
Yeah,
so
he does.
That's why I think he was a manipulator. But they were so embedded, the villagers, in their mindset that they weren't going to be shaken from the course they were embarked on. So I thought that was quite interesting. Yeah,
I think what's so disappointing about Lord Summerisle is that I do think he believes the philosophies he espouses, and I espouse most of them too. But I think he takes a turn, and that's where I get manipulative, maybe fronting a bit, and those are all valid criticisms that you guys have raised, but in a way that makes me disillusioned with the character. I mean, as a character, like an iconic character, I think he's brilliant. As a character with a lot of wisdom, I think he's great, but as a moral character, regardless of his compass being Christian, pagan, whatever, I think he has failings. Let's put it that way, to put it mildly, and not just because it's like a murderous sacrificial act, because those have gone on for eternity in every religious group, including Christianity. But that's the whole stuff, the whole schism. It's modern day. You're being compared with these, the fish out of water with this ancient stuff. And I think the whole movie does a number on you. Like what you bring into the movie, it makes you stop and think. And you may go out and go, fuck this, I'm a Christian, or fuck this, I'm a pagan, but for that moment, you're like, who's really right here morally, who's wrong, who has, and to me that's the nuance that makes it so rich.
It gives everybody a little cognitive dissonance, and you have to kind of work your way through it. Like,
well, I had a friend years ago who saw The Blood on Satan's Claw, and he let me borrow his copy, and I'd been wanting to see it. And I thought it was very powerful. And then he said to me, yeah, that Puritan guy, I mean, he's really like the hero. I'm like, do you think so? He's like, watch it again. So I'm like, okay, because he was a Christian. He was a Jehovah's Witness. I'm not either.
Oh, okay.
And I was like, I watched it again. I still didn't completely agree with him, but I did see the nuance there to where you could make that case. And make the case that what he was against was truly evil. So, you know, and look, you know, but I grew up in the 70s once again, and Satanism, if y'all are probably like, I quit after this. Satan is a big part of my life. I mean, from Black Sabbath to I practice the occult. I'm not some grand wizard, though. I've dated witches. I've had friends who were Wiccans and Satanists. It's all cool with me, you know, unless it's violent, you know, which most Satanists are not redneck metalheads like Ricky Casso who sacrifice cats and their friends. That is an 80s propaganda cliche, the satanic panic.
Yeah.
I'm not saying it didn't happen.
That's their sweet beans. I have one. They deserve
It didn't
that.
happen.
But it did happen, but I don't think it happened to the extent. In other words,
not in any kind of actual organized or real
because
way.
the Satanist with a capital S was Anton LaVey, and Anton LaVey's tenet among many was, do not exploit the weak.
Yeah,
I'm not against rape. I don't kill animals. He's like, but if you've got an enemy who feels, you know, on common ground with you, and he smites you, you fucking knock his ass cold. And being a survivor in a world of abuse and trauma my whole life, sorry to say, that's part of my survival strategy. Not because he said it, but it's something I've acquired and go, yeah, you have to have a certain amount of armor when you're super sensitive like me. You can't go through life as an open wound because people will throw salt in it every single day. If you have a sign that says, kick me, bully me, it's like, but once you start projecting this energy like, you will not touch me, man, a lot of the bullying really dried up in my life.
That's what happened with me too. Yeah. And also what you were saying about like the values of like, you know, if somebody's going to smite you, then, you know, knock them on their ass. That's basically pretty much the same thing. And like I study Shaolin Kung Fu. And so it's very much in alignment with the principles there too. It's like, you're supposed to be non-violent, but that doesn't mean don't defend yourself and others. And so there's this whole thing where like you meet aggression with like the same level. You don't escalate. If somebody is trying to harm you, by all means harm them in order to prevent them from harming you. If someone is trying to kill you, you know, try to knock them on their ass and run away. It's obviously ideal not to kill someone, but if you have no choice, you're cornered, it's them or you, it is completely acceptable to destroy them, because
I think if someone's trying to kill you, you attack with whatever you have, with absolutely no concern about them dying.
No,
I agree with that, Bill.
You stab them in the neck with that's why I always carry a pencil.
Well,
I'm not joking. Carry a pencil. And if someone is trying to kill you, and you know, if they're trying to get you into a car, they're going to find your bones in the woods. That's kidnapping, and that like a life imprisonment. You're not getting out of there.
Yeah, we're past the point of like, that won't happen.
So you stab them in the neck with a pencil and you snap it off. So while they're busy trying to get this broken thing out of their neck, you can run. Just
spoken like a true Fulci fan.
You got to understand something. My wife watches true crime all the time.
I do too.
I work at a high school. It's just these kids yanking my crank all day. I love them. And I come home. I want to relax. It's the weekend, and I walk in there. It's like the trail of blood led from the baby's crib. I'm like, oh, come on, I'm home. Can I please have a moment? So I see this all the time. Just gives you the idea the world is full of people who want
predators.
If only Howie had a pencil. Now back to Justin.
Go Justin.
Justin mentioned
somewhere, not today.
Justin referenced in the movie about the movie, like he said, he didn't really consider it like a horror film. He considered it a cult film. I'm going to argue, no, it's very much a horror film. It's both a terror film and a horror film. Okay.
It's a folk horror.
It falls in the folk horror thing, but it functions more as a terror movie in the sense that there's this extended anxiety and dread as you're knowing something is coming and you don't really know what it is. And I think that builds as it's going. So I think it functions first on its first level as a terror film. But when we get to that point where of the realization, both of Howie and of the viewer, that he's not coming out of this thing alive, I think that's when it shifts into full-on horror film at that point.
And his performance is so good. You're right.
Yeah,
Henry.
because
there's
the inevitability aspect of I'm going to die. And I'm going to die in a horrible way. I think that's the point where if you've been on the fence about it being a horror film, I think that's the point where it comes in that final act. I think that's where you realize you've been watching a transition from terror to horror to that point when it's the inevitability and it's a horrible way to die, and just a horrible way to die. And it's not only that, and I think the part of the horror is not just in the physical way that he's dying, but really all of his firmly held beliefs in this world and in God and all of that have all been laid waste. They failed him. And I think that's where I think it is one of the truest horror films in
existential
that sense,
dread.
Like
Justin,
all the
I think
rules of the world just break on you and you can't count on them anymore.
Yeah. That is a scary feeling. I was going to say, Justin, so kind of what we're doing
I agree with that.
What I've done a lot is over the years is expand. I'm pretty inclusive when it comes to horror. I think there's all kinds of levels, and I didn't arrive at all this all by myself in my brilliant analysis. I mean, that serves me now, but I was a neophyte, and in some ways I still am. But books like Phil Hardy's Encyclopedia of Horror, you had a few writers like Phil Hardy and Kim Newman and a few of these guys, and they put forth these theses. And of course, 35 years later, some of their theses don't hold up because we've actually seen all these lost movies that they only had descriptions of. Like, they'd never seen any of those Coffin Joe movies, but they wrote them up based on hearsay because there was no internet. And
I think I expected I sort of went in not knowing much about the film, thinking there was going to be a supernatural aspect, but just because there's no supernatural aspect, that doesn't mean it's not a horror film. It can still be a horror film. You call it a cult film about cults, I suppose, but yes, it could be a horror as well.
Psychological horror and existential dread. Dread is something, when a movie, this one achieved it to a point with me, but there's a few movies I've watched where this coiled sense of dread absolutely kills me. And when it does, I'm like blissing out. For me, those movies are like the first time I watched Cannibal Holocaust. It just kept getting more and more dread. Like anything can and will happen. Believe it or not, the cook, the thief, his wife, and her lover, I was like, they are playing with fire. Any minute, this psycho is going to do what he did. And, there are other movies that have varying.
Midsummer for me is another one right up there. Wicker Man and Midsummer for me.
That was horrifying.
Yeah, I've heard Midsummer described as a remake of the Wicker Man, but I haven't seen it.
It's not.
But thematically.
They complement each other. They are very different movies.
Because Midsummer is dealing with a lot of guilt and stuff that you're not dealing with.
Psychological stuff. Well, that's a different protagonist.
Yeah.
I mean, but from a film archetype version, controversial statement, if you want to be reductive, like as a film critic, which sadly I still have that little thing in my brain sometimes. I do believe Midsummer is a ripoff of the Wicker Man. I mean, I'll say ripoff, but strongly. Like, I think, the first time I encountered the Wicker Man, it was like it's in its DNA. However, that didn't make me not like it. However, the thing that Bill White brought to my attention that not many people know, if any of y'all know this, that's cool, but I researched it. Midsummer is actually a remake of an actual Swedish or whatever movie. With an almost identical plot, and Ari Aster hasn't really gone out of his way to make that very public. which I think is a little dirty. But I expect out of film remakes now.
Yeah.
You know, people are in it for themselves. I mean,
Yeah.
I've read interviews with Ari Aster. I think creatively, he has great ideas. Morally, he wants to be rich and famous. I mean, that's fine. At least he can back it up with some talent. You know.
Can I ask? I got to take off soon. But has anyone been able to read either the original novel, which I forget what it was called, Ritual? I think it might have been called that the film was based on, or the sequel called The Wicker Woman?
Wicker Tree.
I have heard of the Wicker
called The
Woman.
Wicker Tree.
There was The Wicker Tree was a film, but the original writer wrote a
David
novel
Kinner's novel Ritual.
Yeah.
Oh, the novels.
Yeah,
Robin
I
Howard wrote the
heard
novel.
of Wicker
And
Woman.
then Robin Hardy wrote
it.
wrote a novelization of The Wicker Man.
Oh, so okay, cool.
No, Robin Hardy and Anthony Schaefer. I just read this today. Anthony Schaefer and Robin Hardy wrote the novelization together. Then Robin Hardy wrote a sequel. The Cowboys. It's got an insane Christian Cowboys. It's a really dumb title. And he wanted to option it as a movie, and basically he made it into The Wicker Tree, which wasn't even a feature.
Yeah.
So The Wicker Tree I've seen,
it's
and everybody said, including Hardy, it's a sequel. You know, whether you like the story or not, it's not a reboot, it's a continuation. I always give props to continuity continuations over reboots any day of the week. That's just me.
I agree.
But I want to say that watching it, I was like, yeah, it's got Lord Summerisle. It doesn't have too much else going for it. A few visuals. But then today I read that Christopher Lee emphatically stated, I am not playing Lord Summerisle in that movie. They are two totally different characters, and this is in no way, shape, or form a sequel. And I was like, I know he's prone to histrionic declarations, which we love him for.
Sure.
But come on, dude. That's like
I'm not
saying
gonna
Tim
argue
Burton's
with
Planet
him.
of the Apes wasn't a remake. And I always thought that was disingenuous. Hey, Tim, it's called Planet of the Apes. It has intelligent apes riding horses. It has an astro. Yeah, you're right. It has nothing to do with the.
But it doesn't have the Statue of Liberty at the end.
Alternate
It had the
universe.
Liberty
I thought it was funny when he was
Alternate
saying when you're
universe.
introduced to Count Dooku, you don't realize he's a villain. I was like, how often do you play heroic characters?
How often do you see
Most of your
Christopher
audience
Lee?
is gonna see you as playing a villain.
He's got the villain voice.
He's associated with
But there's
Palpatine.
That's
there was
when he
another-
goes, well, what
Count
do you
Dooku's
mean
a
Lord
good guy."
Summerisle was a hero?
So which one of you two, real quick before Bill goes, which one of you, Bill or Keith, who were narrating the arc? I was just kind of filling in pieces because you've seen The Wicker Tree, right, Keith?
I've seen it. I did not like it.
I didn't like it either. Did you see it, Bill?
No, I heard I wouldn't like it. I heard from people I trust that I wouldn't like
Here's what I want to tell you guys, and you may know this. There was an actual feature sequel conceived by the producers or distributors or whatever company, and they were like, hey, so what happened is it's kind of like when you said the rain, they kind of went in that direction. They didn't mention rain in the article I read, but somehow they rescue Sergeant Howie.
Okay.
They pull him out, and then he goes on a bold crusade to crack the ring of cultists on the island. And then it is explicitly supernatural because he learns that they are magicians, sorcerers, and he fights a giant dragon toward the end in a psychic combat.
Oh,
so that one,
it's going to be like St.
Robin
George
Hardy
and the
said,
Dragon, huh?
Yeah.
Yes, and it was
St.
called
George.
the Lambton Beast something. You know, it's
Yes,
a legend.
yes, the Lambton. Oh my God,
And he
that's
said-
bad on more levels than most films even have levels. That's
Robin
just,
Hardy said,
Because
"Fuck
Lair of the
this."
White Worm is about the Lambton worm.
yeah.
Oh, was it? Okay.
Yeah.
Well,
That's
and then
a
the
that's
other
a
thing
fun
Robin
movie if
Hardy
you don't
said
take drugs.
Yeah,
When
Lair of
they
the White
brought up-
Worm is one we should talk about
Oh
sometime.
yeah, we should. That's
Yeah, sure. Well,
I love
anything
the
Ken
subtlety
Russell-
of a Ken Russell film. You know, it's
a Ken Russell panel would.
oh my
I
God.
love that guy.
Have you
Hey,
seen
yeah,
the
let's
Ken-
do a Ken Russell.
Oh,
That'll be 4
yeah,
or 5
I love
hours.
Ken Russell. I thought that seemed like
Yeah.
one of his most ordinary films.
Oh yeah, yeah.
At
It
least
was
the
one
ones
of
that
his
I've
most
seen.
mainstream films, but it was kind of
Yeah.
subversive.
As opposed to A Kitten for Hitler. Yeah, I mean, sure.
My parents owned a video store in the mid 80s
wow.
through to the mid 90s. So let's just say Lair of the White Worm, it was a regular take home.
Well, when you
On my
see
part.
the
Oh,
your
man.
first Ken Russells are the Devils and Crimes of Passion and Horror. They're all kind
the
of
Devils.
mainstream after that. Like, oh, he did some about musicians. No, I'm kidding. But he was brilliant. He was
Altered States changed
Tom-
my
I like that one.
I love
Tommy is
Altered
very out there. Listomania
Tommy is out
very
there.
out there.
Oh,
Yeah.
Tommy. I saw that so many times and I was way too young to
Even
understand.
I've only
Mahler
seen
is
it
quite out
twice
there.
ever.
God,
Did he
I
do
saw it. I lived in
Women
Puerto
in
Rico,
Love?
and that was one of those that we saw all the time. It was like a regular recurring thing in our theater there. And yeah, I never understood a thing I was seeing, but I loved it.
Great
Okay,
album.
we gotta do it. We gotta do a Ken Russell episode.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Sounds
Hey,
excellent.
everyone, I must go.
Okay,
I'll do
Justin,
some
thank
shopping,
you
We're
for
at the
that.
2-hour mark, so yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
All right,
Yeah.
see
We're
you,
wrapping
Justin.
up.
No, this was fun. Thanks a lot. Okay.
I got to
Thank
run
you,
off
man.
too, but it was great talking. And Kayla, it was really nice meeting you.
Yeah,
Although
nice to meet
I
Thank
think
you.
we have met before, but it just,
A more recent meeting.
yeah.
where,
Y'all
you
were
know,
probably in the hot
I'm
dog
not in
line
the-
at Dragon
Are you going to be at?
Con.
Are you
Didn't
going to be at
realize
Con
it.
Carolinas? Are you going to do Con Carolinas this year? Is that on the agenda?
Probably, maybe, I don't know. I haven't been back actually. I think since that year, because that year was the year before my ex and I split up. So I used to go
Oh,
to
okay.
Con Carolinas with my ex-husband.
Bad
and
memories.
then-
Yeah.
It's not
Yeah, that's
bad
part of
memories
my
so
reason.
much as just it's kind of far because now I live in Metro Atlanta again.
Okay,
At
yeah.
the time I lived in South Carolina, so it was just like a hop, skip, and a jump
Sure.
away. But now it's just like, it's a bit of a hike, so I'll have to see. But I've been wanting to go back. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
All right. Well, Bill, have a good night. And
Thank
thank
you.
you. You were
Thanks,
great.
thanks for your input.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Bill.
Yep.
Take it easy,
Take
guys.
care, man. We haven't heard from
I
Christopher
never figure
Lee
how to get
yet.
out of here.
I don't know
there it
why.
is. Leave.
I can never figure it out. So Chris, what do you never mind. So yeah, we'll wrap up soon. Yeah, so this has been spirited and exciting.
And I don't think Kaelyn has introduced herself.
No,
while
that
we're
never
recording.
happened. We just
Oh,
kinda
we
got
never
into
got to
it
an
about the
introduction.
movie,
This is
and I was
well,
like,
okay.
"That's
Well,
fine, that's
Kaelyn
fine."
Ireland.
She
why
introduced
don't you
herself
introduce
before
yourself?
we started recording.
It wasn't
Yeah.
in the recording
Go for
though,
it.
so other
Okay.
people who weren't here for that have no idea who I am. So that's okay.
But they do now.
They do now. I have opinions about this movie.
Yeah. And they know you're polyamorous.
And they know I'm polyamorous, and that's honestly all there is to
And
know.
they should know you have a wife. I think you mentioned that
You
too.
just
Yeah, you
gained a lot of
mentioned a
fans
wife.
for the channel.
And a black cat that came up too.
Oh,
Yes.
awesome. What's your cat's name?
The cat's name is Mr. Crowley.
All right.
Good omens.
He is in fact the cat of the partner who I showed the Wicker Man, who had not seen the real version of it before. So
Okay,
he's
what was
the
Okay,
boy.
you're
what
gonna
was
have
that
to correct her
partner's
again,
reaction
though.
to that? Having only seen
yeah.
the Cage
Let's
version,
hear that.
what was their reaction?
Ooh, so the first thing I said was, "Oh, so I'm going to be, working on my friend's podcast, and we're going to talk about movies and stuff. And I wanted to rewatch The Wicker Man. Would you like to watch it with me?" And she's like, "Which version? Like the more recent one or the 70s one?" I was like, "The 70s one." And she was like, "Oh, I've only seen the Nicolas Cage one." I was just like, "We're gonna fix that." And
Yeah.
and she was asking like who all was in it, and so like I pulled up the cast list and everything. I was just like, "Oh, and of course Christopher Lee's in it, and yes, of course he is the antagonist in it." And she's just like, "Ooh, he's gonna make a really menacing Summer Isle." And I was just like, "I'm gonna have so much fun showing you this movie. Oh my god." And
Yeah.
yeah, it was an absolute delight getting to introduce it to someone. And she really
What's funny
enjoyed
is
it.
I actually thought Irene Sunters was Patricia Routledge until I got to the credits.
Yeah.
So she liked it?
Yeah, she loved it. She really enjoyed it. She felt pretty much about the same way about it that I did the first time, where I was just like, the pagans are right, Howie's wrong, screw that guy, burn him, sing along with Marisa Kuminen, it's fine, it's all fine.
Right.
That initial reaction of having been traumatized by Christianity in this country, as many of us have been. I think that's a reasonable first reaction. I still kind of feel that way a little bit, even if I do intellectually know they're all in the wrong.
It's
them.
okay.
Everyone in
It's
this
okay.
movie is a bad
It's
We're
person.
okay to
we're
feel
trying to
Except Rowan the Rabbit.
expand
I will stand by
our-
Rowan the Rabbit. Sorry.
But
Ron Morrison.
I just
She's not a
really,
rabbit, she's a hare.
This movie,
I do not do a good Scottish accent, but
the thing about it for Wicker Man is it was one of those movies that I had heard about for so long. I didn't see it till about 10 years ago. And for the first,
later than me? What?
Oh yeah. And it was about 10 years ago, I'm thinking. And I saw that the 88 version. It showed up on a streaming service. I was finally able to, finally, I'm going to get to see this movie. I've heard about it for so long.
I mean,
I
same
actually
boat,
saw it on
actually.
VH.
My first time
The
seeing it
previous
was
time I
maybe
saw
like
it was
5 years
VHS.
ago or something like that, like 4 or 5
And so
years.
I loved it, but boy, once I got the Blu-ray with the mine is 94 minutes. It says it's an hour and 34 minutes, so I don't know what that is. But once I got that, it was like, oh, okay, this is much better. That it explained, because there's a comment in there. I can't remember the line, but there's a line in there that references the amount of time he's been on there, and I'm like, we've only seen one night,
Yeah.
And it's like that doesn't make, that's not squaring up with the dialogue, right? So getting to see that, and I was like, oh, okay, this makes more sense. The temptation sequence makes more sense.
Yeah,
one thing I thought was really interesting is how they were able to vet this guy without the internet or anything. They were able to find this guy.
Yeah, it's magic, man.
Yeah, as Ryan George would say, so shut up. Let's move on. Right? We don't worry about that, right? We just figured Lord Summerisle has
just go with it,
right? Lord Summerisle has
he is pretty open about being an adult virgin, so there's that.
Yeah. And so they found somebody who is very self-righteous in their Christianity, and very vocal about it. And we know how we all just can't stand those people who are so vocal in their self-righteousness, right? And I think that's part of the problem. It's like, yes, he's a true believer, but he's also self-righteous. And if you're a true believer,
he's trying to change you and tell you how to think, and that's just not cool.
If you are actually a true believer in the teachings of Jesus Christ, you are going to be the opposite of self-righteous. You're going to be humble.
I was,
right? Ultimately. I mean, that's
I didn't fit in ultimately.
But if you are a church guy, then you might go that route, because then it's all about
like a week or two ago, I read this article about this church in the South. There's an evangelical church, and they complained that the minister was talking about the Sermon on the Mount, and they said it's not valid anymore. And like, really, you consider yourself a Christian and you don't consider the Sermon on the Mount valid? And like, what is your problem?
What is more foundational to the teachings of Jesus himself than the Sermon on the Mount, right?
They're doing the same thing they did to Jesus, basically.
Yeah,
it's just not here.
Read the Bible, just ignore the red text. That part's not important. We don't listen to that.
Nah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Only if it's politically expedient.
It's like Mel Gibson said when he made The Passion of the Christ. I didn't really care much about the life of Jesus. I really cared about his death. And like,
oh yeah, that's a movie that worships the very minutia of immolation, and desiccation.
I'm gonna let it be on the record right now that I've actually not seen that movie, and I have no intention of seeing that movie, because I've heard everything I need to know about it.
I didn't either, but I
recommend
that
you do. I don't recommend that you do. It's actually okay. I'm
like, my minister saw it and he talked about it, and he wasn't favorable of it either.
I'm gonna say it's actually a powerful movie. It's a well-made movie. It's a guy who knows how to direct.
It's very gory,
but I'm not going to recommend it to you. I don't recommend it to you. I don't think there's anything that you would gain from it.
No,
I don't think
there are lots of good
Christian
movies that I will gain something from, and I have limited time to watch movies in this lifetime. I think I actually want to watch.
I think you gain a lot.
You're better off watching Godspell, because that's all about Jesus' teachings.
Or the life of Brian.
I love Godspell.
But I'm going to say you're better off watching The Wicker Man. I think there's more intellectual stimulation and spiritual contemplation for you afterwards than you would have with Passion Christ. But if you're somebody who just kind of gets off on death, Passion Christ is your movie.
I have other movies for that. I don't want them to be religious.
A lot more entertaining ways to die.
I watch secular death gory movies. I don't need the religion, spoon-fed me while I'm enjoying my
don't taint my good body horror and
I do
you watch demons, that's like non-stop gore.
Meticulous, scientifically accurate imagery of hooks on the end of the barbs of the whip, coming in and ripping the flesh off of some. It's like, okay, if you're gonna do that, I need something more than what you're giving me in this movie. Give me Hellraiser or something like that.
You might as well just watch
more
Saw.
to
You won't
it.
feel as guilty and weird and uncomfortable.
Exactly.
You know.
I remember I won an eBay auction and the thing said thanks and see the movie The Passion of the Christ, and this was when it was new. So
Oh my god!
Do you remember what you won on eBay?
Yeah.
I don't remember.
Yeah, okay. You might find
it
out.
was probably a comic book or something.
Okay, yeah. But
so
yeah.
we're gonna probably wrap up shortly, and I wanted to say thank you. You all did great. I really enjoyed everybody kind of pushing back against each other in a respectful way. I enjoyed the fact that I was able to kind of be more measured and not like resort to telling ridiculous jokes from my teen years to fill time. I've done that on other videos, not on purpose. I can't stop, that's why I need Keith. So I'm like, I'm happy that y'all liked it, and I think this will be a winner. And going forward, preview to the audience, hopefully all going well, we're going to do post-apocalyptic films really soon. And a few other things that are kind of being batted around behind the scenes, but they're not, I don't want to jinx anything. Just kind of loose, But that's one we've all kind of
seeing this
on.
version of the film. My rating on this went up 2 points on IMDb versus when I had previously seen it. So
good.
Okay, good. Yeah, I mean, I would say that too. I mean, this movie pops into my maybe the top 10 favorite movies of all time.
Wow.
That's where it sits now. It's like one of those that I watch at least now once a year, if not twice a year.
I had it at a 6 and I bumped it up to an 8. So
yeah, I would put it up.
So I'm not in your range. I'm not in your range with it, but just this discussion was like, wow, this one was even more nuanced than I thought it was.
Yeah, I mean, for me,
that's good.
It's just one of those perfect movies, and I'm talking like, okay, there's one thing I can criticize on it. There's one thing in the 94-minute cut that I've got, the opening sequence that has Howie in the taking the elements of communion and that whole thing is irrelevant to the. I think starting the movie with just the airplane coming in is the smarter way to start it. That's my only criticism. I think that sequence actually has a recap later, like where he remembers it. So
yeah, they do show it later.
Yeah, so it's unnecessary.
And it's funny because I thought the priest looked like Reverend Simpson and Tommy, and it wasn't. that was Ben Harris, and it was actually I think it says it was Robin Hardy who was the priest in this.
Oh wow!
Well, Keith, I wanted to say that I'm going to kind of paraphrase what Christopher Lee has said to fans in the past, is that mainly toward people who only see the 88 minutes, this is before the 92-minute existed. But if you've only seen the 92 and you haven't seen the 99, you may love it now, but it will be way more of a masterpiece. I know it sounds hyperbolic, but he used to say that. And he's right.
I believe
those 5 minutes really make a difference.
If I could get that one, but when I looked after you mentioned the new 50th anniversary, I noticed I looked it up and it's only,
Henry sent it to me on Dropbox. So
yeah, it's only on the UK region. It's not on the US.
Oh,
right
now, it will make its way to it. Yeah, but it'll probably be a year. Yeah,
but
you're right.
Eventually,
just get the Dropbox from Henry.
Okay,
you can watch it.
No, the Dropboxes come from Duane, and Duane did try to find all the versions, and the only one he could find was the director's cut, which I think, like I said, I'm biased. But if you want to,
Like what I saw was the 98-minute version.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it was not the 94-minute
so as soon as
version.
that's available for me to be able to watch, I definitely want to see it because
I'll share it again on the group.
Okay.
Is that cool?
Yeah, that's
and
cool.
Then excellent. Yay. All right, thank you everybody, and people watching, like all three of you. I really want you to like and subscribe, because the algorithms, most people don't know how they work, and I feel like I'm like begging for help when I try to explain it. But
I have a friend who wrote a book on algorithms.
Well, maybe he can be a guest and explain this.
Kathy O'Neill, Weapons of Math Destruction.
It's like a snowball. In other words, if you are small and you gradually build, you never take off. But if you're small, but like right away, people start investing, then the algorithms go, oh, he could be a hit. and then you get bigger. So
And
the
then
only way to get
They
bigger
start
is
pushing
to
you
get
to-
bigger.
They start pushing you into the suggested videos, that kind of thing.
And that
the
is
deal?
starting to happen, I think, because the views are going up. So all of y'all, please like and subscribe this when it comes up. Just take 5 minutes and go, I'm going on YouTube, like, subscribe. Oh, you already subscribed. Like, okay, bye, I'm done. Like all of them if you haven't. It's really important. And the other thing is, when you can, share them to wherever you're comfortable, you think it's appropriate. I know all of us have done that before, and I'm sure Kaelyn hopefully be glad to do that too.
Yeah. I've shared on my WordPress, my Tumblr, my Twitter, and my Facebook. So.
And Keith has shared. And so my thing is, I've shared to I'm not expect everybody to do this. I just happen to have all these groups I joined about movies early on Facebook. Many of them I never visit, but I'm like, click, click, click. So I share each video between no less than 25 groups and up to 50 groups. 50 is if I'm really stretching how it might be appropriate. So I shared the new kaiju one to 30, the previous kaiju to 42. And last point, people are liking those shares, but they don't understand. And a lot of my friends who
have to go to the actual video.
A lot of people absolutely, and I have a lot of friends with channels, musicians, people way more talented than me and more broke than me. And they're like, y'all have to click on the link and go to it to like it. Liking it on Facebook does nothing. Thank you. And so that's where I'm trying to educate y'all on what you may or may not know without being a dick, and also educate people when I post it by saying, hey, kind of what I just said, but in a, so you probably noticed I've added that little rant. So, but it's improving all the time, and we're working together great, and I'm deeply appreciative. So thank you. We'll meet soon. We'll keep in touch, and we'll figure out a plan for our next episode. So
good to meet you, Kaelyn. We'll see you next time.
Yeah.
Thank you, my friends.
Nicolas Cage. I just got this. It's still sealed, but
always a collector.
With apologies to Nicolas Cage for ragging on that other film so much today.
Yeah. Has anybody seen this?
No,
I haven't seen it. No,
I have not seen that.
It sounds interesting. It says, set in the near future where climate change has wreaked havoc on the American Midwest, a government agency called the Humanity Bureau exiles members of society deemed unproductive and banishes them to a colony known as New Eden. That's the entire description. Sounds interesting.
Wow.
Oh boy.
Kaelyn, Scott's
very
a character. Good. I'm warning you. And and Keith, this is one of those. Let's do it another time. But thank you, Scott, for the information. Planting the seed is important. So,
yes.
Love you guys. We'll be in touch,
thanks.
okay?
All right, Henry. Bye.
Take care, my friend.